Welcome to Infidelity Truths. Before we dive into today's gripping story, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us create more thrilling stories just for you. Let's begin.
The evening was meant to be a grand celebration of love and unity at an elegant gala in the heart of the city. For Adrian, it was more than a formal event. It was a chance to reconnect with his wife, Camilla, amid the music, champagne, and glittering lights. But what began as a night of promise would soon unravel into a devastating revelation known that would change their lives forever. As the evening unfolded, Adrian couldn't ignore the subtle, yet telling, shift in Camilla's behavior. The first crack in their illusion came when she chose to dance with someone else, Logan, a charming colleague she'd grown increasingly close to. Adrian tried to dismiss the knot forming in his chest, the unrelenting voice whispering that something wasn't right. Their marriage, once admired by all, now felt fragile, held together by strained smiles and unspoken doubt. Adrian, a 36-year-old tech entrepreneur, had worked tirelessly to build a life of comfort and success. Camilla, 34, was elegance personified, graceful, captivating, and the center of every room she entered. On the outside, their life looked perfect. Luxury vacations, a stunning home, and a social circle filled with envy-inducing connections. But beneath that glossy exterior, things had changed. Camilla had become more distant. The woman who once shared everything now seemed preoccupied, often lost in her phone, attending parties without him, brushing off his questions with vague answers. Adrian, ever the optimist, had chalked it up to a Phasian extension of her social nature. But deep down, the fear of losing her had begun to take root. The gala, hosted by one of Camilla's colleagues, was supposed to rekindle their connection. She had practically begged him to attend, insisting he meet her new friends. Adrian, eager to hold on to the woman he loved, agreed. Camilla had spent days preparing, meticulously planning her outfit. He admired her enthusiasm, though a part of him wondered if it was more about being seen than being together. As they arrived at the venue, Adrian felt a flicker of hope. Camilla looked breathtaking in a figure-hugging emerald gown, her beauty turning heads as she floated through the room with grace. For a brief moment, he allowed himself to believe that they were okay. But the illusion shattered quickly. Camilla's attention gravitated toward Logan. Adrian watched, heart sinking, as they laughed, leaned in close, and shared inside jokes. At first, he told himself it was harmless, just friendly banter. But the way her eyes lit up, the way her body leaned into Logan's sit, was a connection deeper than friendship. It was a familiarity Adrian hadn't felt from her in months. The woman he loved was slipping away before his eyes. Adrian stood at the edge of the ballroom, nursing his drink, silently observing. He tried to shake off the rising dread. "I'm overthinking this," he told himself again and again. But it was no use. Every stolen glance, every lingering touch between Camilla and Logan felt like another blow to his heart. When the band began a slow, romantic song, Adrian decided to make a last attempt to salvage the night. He approached her with a hopeful smile. "Care to dance?" he asked, his voice soft but sincere. Camilla hesitated. Her eyes darted across the room. "Oh, Adrian, I'm exhausted. Maybe later," she said. Her smile strained as she drifted toward the bar. But she didn't go to the bar. Moments later, Adrian spotted her swaying on the dance floor with Logan. Their bodies moved in perfect harmony, her laughter floating above the music as Logan whispered something into her ear. The intimacy was undeniable. Adrian stood frozen, watching the scene unfold like a slow-moving tragedy. This was the truth he had tried so hard to deny. The late nights, the coldness, the lies, it had all led to this moment. He didn't cause a scene. That wasn't who he was. But something inside him had shifted. If Camilla wanted to make her choices in public, then so would he. As the host took the stage to offer a toast, Adrian walked up beside him and politely took the microphone. The room fell silent as he cleared his throat. "Good evening, everyone," Adrian began, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. "Thank you all for being here tonight. I'd like to propose a toast to truth, because truth has a funny way of showing up, even when you least expect it. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Camilla froze, her face paling as her eyes met his. Adrian continued. Tonight, I learned something valuable. It's heartbreaking to realize that the person you built your life around has already moved on without you. He turned his gaze directly to Camilla. Camilla, thank you for showing me who you really are. With that, he set down the mic and calmly walked off the stage. Silence engulfed the room. The whispers followed him as he made his way out, but he didn't look back. The cold night air greeted him like a slap, cutting through the fog of betrayal. Alone in his car, Adrian drove in silence, his mind replaying the evening's events. The pain was overwhelming, but underneath it, he felt something unexpected. Relief. The next morning, Camilla tried to apologize, her eyes swollen from crying. I didn't mean for it to happen, she whispered. Please, Adrian, don't give up on us. But he had already given up. Or rather, he had let go. The trust was gone, the damage irreparable. Adrian filed for divorce. In the weeks that followed, he threw himself into his work, surrounded himself with those who truly cared, and began the slow, painful process of healing. The betrayal still stung, but with every passing day, the weight lifted. That night at the gala hadn't just been the end of his marriage, it had been the start of something new. A journey of self-respect, a return to his own worth, a promise to never again settle for anything less than loyalty, honesty, and love. Camilla may have chosen someone else, but Adrian chose himself. And that was the beginning of a far greater love story. The morning after the gala felt surreal. Adrian woke to silence, his head heavy, his heart heavier. The images of the night before played on a loop. Camilla's laughter in Logan's arms, the gasps from the crowd, the look in her eyes when he delivered the toast that cracked their perfect image. She hadn't come home that night. By the time Adrian was sipping his coffee in the kitchen, the door finally creaked open. Camilla stepped in slowly, her makeup smeared, her hair a mess, like she had battled with the weight of her choices all night. Adrian, she whispered, eyes brimming with tears. He didn't respond immediately. He just watched Hare, his wife, the woman he had loved for years, now a stranger in their own home. I messed up, she said, her voice cracking. I didn't mean for things to go this far. Logan, it was just, I don't know what I was thinking. Adrian set his mug down, the sound loud in the quiet kitchen. You weren't thinking, he said softly. You were acting. Camilla reached for his hand, but he pulled away. I never stopped loving you, she pleaded. But things between us changed. You were always working, always distracted. Logan was just there. Adrian's jaw tightened. So that makes it okay. You found attention somewhere else and decided that was reason enough to betray me? Camilla looked down, ashamed. There were problems, yes, Adrian continued. But I would have fought for us, Camilla. I wanted to fix what was broken. You? You walked away long before I gave that toast. She broke down, her sobs echoing through the house. But Adrian couldn't console her not anymore. The next few days were a blur. Camilla tried again and again notes on the mirror, long texts, desperate voicemails, but Adrian didn't respond. The decision was made. He filed for divorce within the week. Camilla begged him to reconsider. Even Logan, awkward and sheepish, reached out to apologize. But the damage was done. The life Adrian once knew had collapsed and, oddly, he felt lighter beneath the rubble. Adrian moved into a loft on the other side of the city. It was smaller, simpler, but it was his. No more staged dinner parties or empty conversations. He filled his days with work, late-night drives, and rediscovering pieces of himself he'd buried in the routine of marriage. The pain lingered, of course. Seeing mutual friends take sides, dealing with whispers in the office, and sorting through legal documents wasn't easy. But Adrian stayed silent, choosing dignity over drama. One evening, as rain tapped softly against the windows, Adrian sat at his desk, reading an old journal he had forgotten existed. It was filled with dreams, goals, and late-night thoughts he had once written with passion. It hit him then how far he had drifted from the man he used to be. He closed the journal and smiled to himself. Maybe this heartbreak wasn't the end of something beautiful, but the rebirth of something even stronger. Weeks turned into months. Adrian's company expanded. He picked up new hobbies: photography, hiking, even painting. He traveled. He made new friends. He laughed more freely. And with every passing day, the memory of Camilla became less sharp, less painful. She reached out once more, a handwritten letter, apologizing again, asking if maybe, someday, they could talk. Adrian folded the letter gently and placed it in a drawer, unread. He had already had his closure, and he had already started a new chapter where his happiness no longer depended on someone else's validation. The night at the gala had shattered everything. But from the broken pieces, Adrian had built a life more honest, more fulfilling, and more peaceful than anything he had known before. Because sometimes, the worst night of your life doesn't mark the end. It marks the beginning. 6 months had passed since the night that rewrote Adrian's life. He had settled into a quiet, rhythmically mornings at the gym, long work days at his expanding company, and peaceful evenings in his loft. The storm had passed, and in its place was a calm he hadn't known in years. But healing wasn't linear. Some nights were still hard. Certain songs, certain smells, even the way the rain hit the window could send him spiraling into memories of Camilla. He didn't hate her anymore. He didn't even miss her. What he mourned was the version of himself that believed so deeply in something that turned out to be a lie. One Friday afternoon, while attending a business seminar downtown, Adrian met someone, unexpectedly. Her name was Isla, marketing consultant, with a sharp mind and a smile that disarmed him almost immediately. They had been seated next to each other by chance, but by the second coffee break, they were deep in conversation about books, music, traveling, even heartbreak. "I guess we all survive something," Isla said, twirling her coffee cup. "The trick is figuring out who we are after it." Her words stuck with him long after the seminar ended. They exchanged numbers. Nothing heavy, nothing forced. Just easy. Over the next few weeks, their conversations continued, texting during breaks, sending funny memes, sharing thoughts late at night. Adrian was cautious. He wasn't ready to fall again. But with Isla, there was no pressure, no pretending. One Saturday, they met for dinner. Just dinner. But when the night ended, with her hand briefly brushing his as they said goodbye, Adrian felt something stir in his warmth, a possibility. Meanwhile, Camilla's world was beginning to unravel. The glitter of her social life had dimmed. Logan, it turned out, wasn't ready for a real relationship, especially not one born from betrayal. He ghosted her 3 months after the gala. Friends began to distance themselves. The whispering she once ignored had turned into blatant judgment, and no matter how many times she tried to fill the void with parties, trips, meaningless flings, it remained. One evening, driven by a combination of guilt and nostalgia, Camilla drove past Adrian's loft. She didn't knock. She simply watched the light glowing softly from his window, and then, to her shock, saw him step out onto the balcony with Isla. They laughed. Camilla couldn't hear what they were saying, but she saw the way Adrian looked at her. It was the look he used to give her, back when things were pure, before lies and silence and everything else she had ruined. She drove away, tears stinging her eyes. That night, she wrote in her journal, "I lost him, not because of Isla, but because I stopped valuing him long before she ever arrived." Back at the loft, Adrian leaned on the balcony railing, the city lights stretching far into the night. "Do you ever feel like everything had to fall apart to fall into place?" Isla asked quietly. Adrian looked at her, thoughtful. "Every day," he said. "And for the first time, I'm okay with that." Isla smiled and nodded. "Then I think you're exactly where you're supposed to be." Adrian took a deep breath. He no longer carried the weight of betrayal. Instead, he held something lighter, something better. A fresh start. 1 year. That's how long it had been since the gala. Since Adrian stood on that stage, heart shattered and voice steady, as he peeled back curtain on the life he thought he knew. 12 months since everything changed, and somehow everything had become better. Adrian now lived a life of balance. His company had grown exponentially, but he no longer buried himself in work to avoid pain. His loft, once a quiet escape, was now a space filled with laughter, soft jazz on Sunday mornings, and the gentle presence of someone who truly saw him. Their bond hadn't exploded into fireworks, it had bloomed, slow and real, built on conversations that lasted for hours, shared silence that never felt heavy, and respect that ran deeper than romance. She never tried to fix his scars. She simply held space for them. Adrian loved her for that. One crisp evening, Adrian stood by the window, watching the golden light of dusk stretch across the skyline. Isla came up behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "You're quiet," she said softly. "Just thinking," he replied. "About her?" He paused, then nodded. "A little. It's strange. For so long, that night haunted me. But now, it feels distant. Like a storm I once walked through. Wet clothes, aching bones, but I survived. And now the sun's out." Isla leaned her head against his back. "You didn't just survive. You healed." He turned to face her, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "I didn't think I could, but you reminded me what it feels like to be chosen genuinely." They stood in silence, content. Later that night, Adrian received a message from Camilla. Short, simple. "Congratulations on your company's award. You deserve the recognition. I'm glad you're doing well, Camilla." He stared at it for a moment, then deleted it. Not out of bitterness, but because he no longer needed her validation. His closure hadn't come from her apology, it came from choosing himself. From walking away when staying would have meant losing who he was. Adrian had loved deeply, been broken badly, and risen quietly. And now, standing at the edge of a life he was building with someone who matched his soul, he finally felt peace. The night of unveiling hadn't just revealed betrayal. It had revealed Adrian. And that truth was the beginning of everything. If you were moved by Adrian's journey from heartbreak to healing, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more emotional stories that touch the soul. Your next favorite story is just a click away. Let me know if you'd like a more dramatic, romantic, or suspenseful variation. The moral lesson for the story. True healing begins the moment you choose self-respect over silent suffering. Sometimes, losing someone who betrayed you is the first step toward finding the peace and love you truly deserve.